Monsignor Moses Carmona Rivera, Pillar of Traditionalism in Mexico, Part 3. Father Carmona as a priest before Vatican II. This section shows us Father Moses Carmona as a model priest. His biographical data only shows us the years he was in one or another place. Because of this, we now pause to present a detailed account of his prolific priestly life, from his ordination, 1939, until his resistance against the innovators that, in the name of the conciliar spirit, were demanded from him, 1970. We consider these 31 years of his priesthood as the first stage of his ministry, and the other 21 years, from 1970 to his death in 1991, as the second stage. So why this distinction? We make this chronological fragmentation because, according to the post-conciliar church's view, Father Carmona lived his first 31 years as an obedient priest and his last 21 years as a rebellious priest. However, for us traditional Catholics, and for our kind readers, Father Carmona was only one priest, always himself, with only one attitude, with only one thought, with only one faith, the Catholic faith. And that is how he was in his long and fruitful 52 years of priestly life. There aren't two Father Carmonas, the one before and the one after the council. The only Father Moses Carmona that existed was the same one that, at his ordination in 1939, pronounced the anti-modernist oath, and who defended the Catholic dogmas against the modernists after 1970, until his death in 1991. The same valor and intransigence he used to defend the tradition of the Church, he used to defend Catholicism at the beginning of his priesthood from the Protestant plague that was threatening to expand in all the towns in Guerrero, of which he had charge. The works he made during the first 31 years of his ministry, confirmed by numerous witnesses and eloquent letters, are a testimony of the exemplary priestly life of Father Carmona. These praises are not a product of the writer of this book. In numerous letters from bishops and associates who wrote to Father Carmona may be found congratulations to the valiant soldier of Christ for his triumphs over the Protestants and other enemies of the soul against vices, bad habits, ignorance, etc. Why did these congratulations turn into jokes, threats, and persecutions when Father Carmona, after 1970, continued being the valiant soldier of Christ and a combatant against those who wanted to Protestantize the church? And Father Carmona, like the Holy Church, never changed. The ones who changed were the modernists, who turned their backs on the church's teaching and the tradition of 260 popes. Let us then see Father Carmona in his first 31 years as a priest. We saw in his biography that after his ordination, he was sent to La Soledad Parish Church in Acapulco to assist the elderly priest Florentino Diaz. His stay there was brief because in 1941 he was transferred to Chilapa to fulfill the charge as a Castilian and Latin language professor. And after 3 years of academic work, His Excellency Leopoldo Diaz Escudero, Bishop of Chilapa, decided to assign Father Carmona as parish priest of Coyuca de Benedites. Now, just a few months later, the bishop was commending him, telling him that his work was on a good path. Quote, "Without you becoming proud, I want to tell you that until now you were doing well." End quote. And after some discreet advice, he reiterated this recognition. Quote, "The big consolation you bring to the mitre of Chilapa as victories of the dispersed camps led by skilled captains greatly affects their bishop's heart and the heart of Christ. Keep working well, and God will reward you." End quote. At the end of the letter, Canon Arismendi sends his salutations. Greetings from Arismendi, who jumps with joy before your victories and hopes they arrive at the same level of the victories of love, even to martyrdom, the best of the best for a priest. This letter, which is the first preserved in relation to his ministry, has significant results. On the one side, it is evidence that during his short stay in Coyuca de Benitez, Father Carmona already had positive achievements. Surely these successes refer to his conquest over the Protestants, since in his curriculum vitae he points out that he received the parish church from that town, from Father Juan Maciel's hands, as if it were rotten fruit, due to the advanced contamination of the Protestants had achieved. One day, excuse me, one day he remembers he received an article from Lutheran magazine that said, almost in all Coyuca, Protestants are in control, and there are only a few fanatics left. When he saw it, Father Carmona said, I feel my soul on fire, and I had just gotten there. Father Carmona's reaction was very praiseworthy. By it, he displayed the flaming apostolic zeal that would always characterize him. On the other hand, this letter contained beautiful advice that superiors would give brilliant parish priest, advice that he practiced all his life, even during the times that those superiors turned against him. How could they reproach Father Carmona, their disciple, if after Vatican II he did exactly what they asked him in that letter and other letters? Quote, I hope God keeps you always active, so you will always live convinced that your priesthood is on the right track, to God's glory and not to the unimportant positions or rewards in this life. This last practice makes for arrogance instead of saving souls. Your interest has to be only to save yourself and to save souls and more souls. Don't let priests have satisfaction in making profit. Let us go with the satisfaction of becoming Christ-like in the middle of our towns. End quote. The congratulations for his good work kept arriving. In August of 1946, Father Arinsmidi wrote, I just received your letter of fire and I congratulate you. I believe that God will reward the bishop that so aptly imposed his hands on you. He immediately encourages him with beautiful words. The priest is for the cross and must be a living cross, soaked in the blood of Christ and crucified by error and sin. Finally, he says about the school, I hope that your little school becomes a big school, where the girls will be formed with a big heart worthy of Christ. As we have seen, Father Carmona was a real soldier for Christ in Coyuca, at war for the salvation of souls in the adverse environment. Now, these circumstances marked his combative spirit in the same way his directors did. In a letter of May 18, 1945, Constantino Azrimendi wrote, quote, His Excellency the Bishop praises your actions during this pro-Christ campaign and encourages you with the hope that you will do whatever can be done for the health of that coastal region, end quote. The canon himself tells him in another letter, for the time being, His Excellency blesses you from the bottom of his heart, and he trusts that the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Mary will not abandon you during this combat for the faith. Months after, the Bishop of Chilapa congratulated him again, saying, I don't want to ignore your pleasant letter from the 11th of this month, congratulating you for the celebrated triumph that you just achieved for the church in your interview with God's opponent. End quote. Before saying goodbye, he encouraged him in his work. With prudence, but with energy, always defending God's rights with prayers. That is the foundation in which you must drink the science of your need for your combats. The last congratulation Father Carmona received that year, at least of those contained in his episcopal archives, was one of Father Alfred Nahara sent him. Of course I congratulate you. God, our Lord, will help you always, so you will triumph against his enemies, and the enemies of our mother, the Holy Roman Catholic Apostolic Church. Surely Father Carmona, in his attempt to win over all the residents of Coyuca, made use of all the means within his reach to attain this goal. One of them was the microphone, and according to his mail, it is what the valiant priest used during his ministry. To his misfortune, the municipal civil authorities reported him to the state government because the use of the microphone was illegal in the way he was using it. For these reasons, Canon Arizmendi exhorts Father Carmona to use prudence in this case and advises him, if it is really forbidden by law, you should stop, manifesting that because of causes pertaining to law you are deprived of doing your pastoral duties. But within the church, you will continue fighting to save souls. At the end, he encourages him with words that Father Carmona will become prophetic. Quote, God will grant you to see new triumphs, because he will always triumph even in the catacombs. Half a year later, the same Father Arizmendi encourages him again. I'm very happy to know that you are persecuted because of Christ. Christ called blessed all his heart and his voice, those who were persecuted because of him. That is why I say to you, you are doing fine. Continue. No matter how many congratulations he received, not everyone was kindness for Father Carmona. He would write his friend Father Arizmendi, who in turn would strengthen him. I congratulate you because you suffer and you know how to suffer for Christ. You suffer persecution from justice, and you don't forget that this one of the Beatitudes. These letters are proof of the fighting spirit which Father Carmona was formed from his first years as a parish priest. This was his temperament. This was what the circumstances demanded of him, and that is how his superiors formed him. His life was always like this. He confirmed it in his curriculum vitae. Quote, indeed, I was sent to fight, and all my time was devoted to it. Aside from his courage during these first years, his fidelity to doctrine and apostolic zeal was underlined. This is how it always was. As you will see, Father Carmona received many congratulations, not only from his success, but even from his failures. In April of 1948, his good friend, Father Arizmendi, encouraged him. I congratulate you even for your defeats, because even defeats for Christ's sake are achievements. Keep going. You know about the Via Dolorosa to Calvary. And Calvary is the highest proof of love to the beloved Christ, and from the cross to heaven. This is the goal of life. Some days later, the canon wrote a beautiful letter to Father Carmona, which we will partly translate, not only for its depth, but because we can say that it becomes prophetic for the rest of Carmona's life. Quote, once again, I congratulate you. If the priest's work divinely, he only sees earth to tie it to heaven, and then he performs as a priest. When he starts working humanly, that is when he abandons heaven and souls and comes down to earth, and soils his priestly ministry. Because the priesthood is divine and heaven is their heritage, the more exalted, the more tenacious he has been, the more souls he has conquered or struggled to conquer. A priest who doesn't keep anything in life but a bedroll that may be used to wrap him when he dies, and only has the weapons he used to fight for Christ, deserves congratulations and has to keep in mind this apostolic declaration. No one will be crowned except the ones that legitimately persevere to the end. But perseverance, activity, and combat unite and are good companions. This is why the good priest should not be afraid that the coveted virtue and perseverance will be absent. The only ones that don't deserve are the conformists, weak, and inactive ones. That is the reason why you are in a magnificent position, and God will not leave you even if money does. In June in 1949, when the imminent inauguration of the little school that Father Carmona was struggling to build was at hand, Father Alfredo Nehera wrote him, quote, "In order to avoid the suspicions of the enemies of the Catholic Church, of the Catholic schools, I believe it would be more convenient that you name the school Garcia Moreno Private School, which I have gladly accepted to sponsor. Father Arzmendi and I are requesting that you notify us of the date and the grand opening of said school." End quote. Months later, some people from Aguas Blancas have had a difficulty with Father Carmona about the church. This dedication comes from the letter Father Arzmendi sent, in which he encourages him to keep going in spite of the adversities. Quote, "His Excellency wants to show his trust and wants you to know how clear it is that this is an act of the devil, the enemy of priests that do good work in the cause of God. So he encourages you to keep going as you have done until now, doing good according to our divine model, even though you are not understood and have to suffer more, because the best priestly ministry is the one that goes through tribulation." End quote. A month later, Father Nahara, excuse me. A month later, Father Nahara insisted, "I am pleased with your battles because you know the land, and even better, the sea in which you struggle, the Tiberias, and you also know who you have to cry to in times of storm." Father Carmona working, and he would opportunely inform his superiors. Canon Arizmendi answered one of his letters, "Your valiant and priestly letters always give the feeling of achievement in duty." Among his daily works in Coyuca de Benitez Parish in May of 1952, Father Carmona received a notification that surprised him. Quote, "Relying on the ministerial works you have been doing, His Excellency the Reverend Diocesan Bishop orders me to inform you that he has decided to transfer you to Vicaria Forania de Omneptepec Parish, advising you to reply promptly as informed. Canon Arzmendi, Secretary." End quote. In an attached letter, dated the same as the notification, Father Arzmendi himself, not as the bishop's secretary, but as a friend, encourages Father Carmona to docilely comply with the appointment because the church needs you in the place your prelate appoints you to. The Holy Spirit will help you there. Now keep in mind the phrase of St. Francis Xavier, "Do not ask, do not refuse. A moment before the tabernacle and answer the fiat that is needed." As a good son, Father Carmona gave his fiat, even though it wasn't easy. This is how he states it in his curriculum vitae. "It was painful for me to say goodbye to my first parish, but it had to be done and I did it." Although he acknowledges he was very welcome in Ometepec by the vicar cooperator, Jesus Cortez and his faithful, he continued to miss the faithful in Coyuca. The memories that he had in Coyuca were those of catechizing the towns, going sometimes in cars and sometimes walking through the palm tree rows. About his labor in his first parish, Father Carmona summarizes it. "I was tired, but at the same time satisfied of the triumphs over the opponents." After putting out the fire caused by the heretical Protestant proliferation, they were sending him to Ometepec to put down other fires for the same reason, As soon as he arrived at the new parish, the bishop suggested new methods through Canon Arismendi, attending the circumstances happening at the Church of Omniptec, and in order to minimize the heretical advertisings through religious teachings, among other views, I recommend Father handing out the EVC brochures, authorizing him, if he thinks it necessary, to receive a stipend of 6 pesos from each baptism, from which he could reimburse 1 peso to the godparents, giving them a brochure and convincing them to please read it. Weeks later, the often mentioned secretary of the bishop urges him that, because of the appointment they gave him as a financial expert, he is to administer without scruples the parish of Iguila. Also, the bishop recommends Father Inocente Gomez to you, that your experience may advise him of whatever is more convenient, especially charity and good treatment of the parishioners, disinterested in serving them, love of sacrifice, the beauty of worship, promoting holy hours, Station of the Cross, First Communions, preaching, exercises, etc. Father Carmona's devoted and clean trajectory had a long time before had him deserve his bishop's trust, who in said letter reiterates to him, quote, "It would be useless to manifest that His Excellency has firm trust in your ministerial labors, and that your parish shall be more Catholic every day." Now, because of his uncompromising efforts and battles, Father Carmona was well known in Chilapia as a strong, enterprising, long-suffering priest. And for this reason, his good friend, Father Arismendi, had no problem calling him the strong man in his letter of February 21st, 1953. For the ministry of Father Moises, the UCFM, Mexican Catholic Feminine Union, never stopped being important. He frequently informed the bishop concerning his activities, who responded to one of Father Carmona's reports, quote, "In relation to the Cooperative Society of the UCFM, according to the plans that you pursue and by what you reveal to me, it is not about any negotiations on your part, but as a way to protect the needy. You may continue watching it as you have done until now." Unquote. A month later, our well-known Canon Arismendi, wanting to advise Father Carmona about the attitude to follow in the daily conflicts, set before us an appropriate profile of the character and attitude of Father Carmona. Quote, "The time to defend God's rights is now, not the future, and is for everyone, without waiting instructions. For anybody, we have the obligation of accepting the challenge. Those who are prudent are always waiting for norms and instructions, and that is why they leave when their feelings are hurt. You are always right, answering in this precise time. When they ask, answer. When they ask for statements, you give them statements. If all of us did this, if all of us belonged to that indomitable race of those blessed, ill-mannered martyrs, everything would be changed. But prudence changes us instead of us changing what should be changed." End quote. He finally expresses his desire. As long as God helps you to continue working in priestly manner for your holy cause, that you may save many souls, as well as your own, even if they call you imprudent, that at the end, quo habitat in celis irritabit os. Note, Father Carmona's decisive character and combative spirit, his superiors congratulated him for this. It was exactly as they thought him to be. This is how Father Carmona was when his great apostolic zeal resolved to guard the orthodoxy of the faith in the face of progressivism. Coming back to our illustrious priest and his parish in Ometepec, not everything was pleasure. Protestants were not only his only enemies, but also among those who called themselves his friends were some that turned their backs on him. Father Rosario Ojeda Flores, knowing the sorrows that afflicted Father Carmona, supported him by writing these words. I'm sorry that in this new parish you also encounter inimicus homo, that sows discord in the fields of your activities, whom people feed by their intrigue with their friendship, that you may not be discouraged by the difficulties that you are stumbling over. I quote St. Paul to Timothy from 2 Timothy 4:11. It seems that before he suffered these thorny situations, maybe when the school was just inaugurated, Father Carmona received another congratulations without specifying the date, because unfortunately Father Gabriel Ocampo does not reference it, although Father Carmona in his address and omnipec the place. In this letter, happiness, advice, and wishes are mixed. Quote, with all my soul I congratulate you for the brave attitude you faced from the everlasting enemies of Christ and his doctrine. As a brother priest, I congratulate you with all my heart for the triumph you have already obtained, snatching at least 70 boys from their infernal clutches, even though there are millions and millions that moan helplessly, because there are no valiant men that can save them, because they fear to join in the battle. Cheer up, dear Father, and organize your Catholic Action Army, because without it, you are a big general without an army, without soldiers. Our Lord asks you to organize your army. You have given him many victories. You now have taken 70 children from them. Soon there will be 1,000, 10,000, or more. Continue the battle, and the supreme victory will reward you. Yes, place Christ in the most valiant place of the school, that he may publicly begin to preside in the schools of Omnitepec and spread that blessed practice in all the Catholic schools, which are now afraid to profess their Catholicism, and which instead are forming brave soldiers, are forming a multitude of hypocrites who hate Christ more and more. I congratulate you, Father, and ask our Lord to be with you always and never stop giving you victory for the good of souls. End quote. By 1955, Father Carmona had received another comforting note from Father Arizmendi. Quote, in the meantime, I can only congratulate you because you fight and suffer. The comfortable priests do not resemble Christ. If we have an ideal, it has to be Christ and only him. Do everything for Christ and become good, if God grants you that grace. End quote. At the end of that year, Father Carmona would suffer a big blow to his heart. On November 24, according to a subsequent letter, the dear Bishop of Chilapa and servant of God, Leopoldo Diaz Escuardo, gave up his soul to the Creator. The death of his close friend Constantino Arizmendi also caused him an equal and greater pain. We can't precisely date his death, for we don't know it. The memories of Father Carmona kept of his faithful advisor were warm and many. Quote, Father Arizmendi knew how to teach all of us who knew him about his sweet teachings of obedience to the bishop. Let us follow his luminous example. Everyone should know that Father Arizmendi formed an obedient and self-sacrificing clergy. As usually happens when an important figure passes on, there was an environment full of speculation over who would succeed Bishop Leopoldo Diaz Escudero. At the beginning of 1956, a letter came from Father Carmona to Father Ruben Flores. It may be deduced that with the appointment of Father Torres as the new bishop, his followers who considered themselves as part of the elite of Montezuma Institute, United States, would have had their own way, underestimating the group of priests that were formed by the deceased. Among the priests in this latter group was Father Carmona, who, despite suffering indignation from this unfair humiliation, was trying to recover and help others to recover, remembering the valuable advice of his faithful friend Father Arizmendi. Here is an emotional letter. Here's an emotional letter that reveals Father Carmona was made of flesh and blood, had a firm temper, but was subject to the but was subject to the virtues of obedience and generosity. Let us see. Reverend Father Ruben Flores. My dear father and friend, I received a letter from Father Martinez in which he said that the Holy See named Father Torres as residential bishop. I imagine the joy of the clique and the guffaws they must be using to celebrate their thunderous triumph. There is nothing we can do. We don't have any other way than the one we ourselves appointed when we promised obedience to the bishop who ordained us and to his successors. Even if we don't like it, that is the way. And I'm willing to go wherever they send me and to go down as far as needed. We already know what is coming. We well know that we will always be down and that we will always be for the elite ones who come from Montezuma. The ignorant priests, burros, cynics, and everything else they want to call us. But let them not say that we are disobedient, because we will never agree to this. I think that I am the most troubled one, but I am disposed for anything because I was ordained for everything. We should ignore the ones who insult us and let us not waste time in useless disputes with them. It is sad and distressing that while our enemies are more united, we are divided. Jesus Christ, our divine master, clearly told us so that everyone would understand. He who does not sow with me scatters. And how is he going to harvest with Christ who lives only sowing discord? Father Reuben, you are young, and you shouldn't use your ministry on things that aren't worth it. I was also losing sight of things, but I found a letter from Father Arizmendi, and in it I found my way. He used to tell me, Father Carmona, don't waste your shots using them against your own brothers. Use them against the enemies of Christ and his church. These words made me react, and here I am, in the field that was pointed out to me, doing as much as I can in the name of duty. We should place our souls and hearts in what our superiors have entrusted us with. If because of our clumsiness we don't do it right, at least let them see our goodwill. And as proof that Father Carmona had a simple and affectionate heart, he finishes his letter to Father Reuben as follows. Say hello to your parents for me. You know that I greatly esteem them with all my heart, and I beg you on my knees, do not stop sending me your holy blessings. A person is tested in adversity, and Father Carmona gave proof of his valor in adversity. His spirit of humility, obedience, and integrity gave countless proofs of his high sense of fidelity to the priesthood, to his bishop, to his divine master. His behavior was not only irreproachable, but exemplary and praiseworthy. That is how Father Carmona spent his 7 years in Omnipec, with triumphs and failures, with congratulations and comprehensions, with honors and defamation. Probably this is what made him request from the bishop a transfer to another parish. The words that Father Carmona writes in his curriculum vitae should aid as a conclusion of his labors as parish priest in Omnipec. There I did everything I could, but I didn't do much. The battles never made me turn away from the defamation, but the defamation did. That is the reason why in June 1958, when the new bishop of Chilapa, Alfonso Torres y Corbian, visited, Father Carmona, now referring to himself in the third person, insistently beseeched him to open an investigation, and if he was guilty, to punish him. And at the same time, he begged him to be transferred because it was impossible to continue working in those conditions. His Excellency investigated, but didn't find anything to reproach him for. Next, Father Carmona explains the intricate process he went through for the requested transfer. Quote, The bishop expressed that he didn't have a vacancy to transfer him to. Father Carmona answered him that he would gladly go to any parish, no matter how small it was. He suggested a change, that the parish priest from El Carmen be moved to Omnitec and me to El Cameron in Acapulco. But during those days, the bishop transferred to Quintero, and everything became difficult. Even though I had already had an appointment, they refused to hand it over. This is the reason why I had to go to the apostolic delegate, who ruled in my favor. He continues, the environment the priest and his vicar left in the parish church was full of hostility, and for this reason I decided to stay in the Providence Chapel and to leave my new vicar in the Del Cameron parish. Fortunately, in the same year, the division of the diocese was made, and the Bishop of Acapulco, Jose del Pilar Quezada, then proceeded to the division of the Del Carmen parish, and I stayed in the Divine Providence Chapel, the commission that was submitted to me April 12th, 1959. The Bishop of Acapulco Cathedral, Acapulco Guerrero, a letter. Dear beloved in Christ, being absolutely certain about your doctrine, pastoral zeal, and prudence, we constitute you as the movable parish priest of Divine Providence, new church of this city, with all the rights, privileges, obligations, and faculties according to sacred canons and the spiritual temporal approval traditions. You will make your profession of faith and the ante-modernist oath before our Vicar General, Father Jorge Parra Martinez, parish priest of Los Soledad, located in this city. Don't believe that the Divine Providence was really a true parish church. It was up for Father Carmona to continue to improve and develop it. This is how he explained it. The temple was a big hall. There was no parochial church, and this is why we started raising funds to remodel it. Father Gabriel Ocampo blessed the foundation stone on the day of the disastrous Council of Vatican II began, that is, October 11th, 1962. After 3 years of efforts and work, the Divine Providence Temple was declared Exemplary Temple of Acapulco by His Excellency Bishop Quezada, who blessed the crypt on October 17th, 1965. We want to conclude this section leaving Father Carmona at his last and definite parish, for which he gave proof of his fidelity to the Church of all times, after the change direction the modernists accomplished in Vatican II. From 1965 to 1972, we find almost nothing in the epistolary archives of Father Carmona for us to be able to write what happened during that important post-conciliar stage. Because of what happened after 1972, after he had contact with Father Sainz Iriaga, we assume that during those 7 years, Father Carmona remained alert to all the changes that the Church suffered, the ones that descended officially from the hierarchy and also the ones that were taken for granted. He also alerted that it was happening in the national and international religious sphere. His observant and reflective spirit, combined with his clear common sense, permitted him to be aware that something strange, sadly strange, was happening in the Church. Father Carmona joined the large number of priests who couldn't give credit to what they saw. They suffered the indescribable sorrow of seeing how the Holy Church that they so loved torn apart. How Father Carmona faced crisis in the Church at its beginning and will analyze in the next section.